2018 regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman and Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the planning commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, PDAs, or any other devices that might disrupt this meeting please either be placed in silent mode or turned off. The roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Abhidian?
Here.
Ms. Cruz? Mr. Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Faison? Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krant?
Here.
Ms. Koopa? Here. Mr. Tanzika? Mr. Tagle?
Here.
We have quorum present tonight, but I just want to make a quick comment regarding to the vote tonight. So for any motion to pass anything on the agenda, we need 5 votes. So there's 6 of us here, so we would, it's a margin of 5 to 1 for anything to get approved tonight. So we're going to make sure that the applicants are aware of that and that we are aware of that moving forward for the items on the agenda tonight. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Ms. Koopa, can I get a second?
Okay.
By Mr. Krant. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa? Yes. Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes. Item number 3, approval of the minutes for the May 8th, 2018 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Mr. Edmonds and second by Mr. Tagle. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa? Yes. Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes. Item number 4, public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we move to item number 5, the Zoning Board of Appeals report, ZBA report. Ms. Koopa?
We had one variance application for a treehouse that had been constructed several years prior, I would say maybe 12 or 13 years prior, and only recently it was brought to the attention that it had not received a variance for the height and some of the other dimensional issues. We approved it. There was a dissent, but it was an interesting situation because the gentleman who had built it was the husband and the wife had come before the ZBA, and so I just hope that people realize that she didn't know, and that her kids had used this treehouse growing up, and then he passed away, and then somebody brought it, some neighborhood dispute. It says, seems like,
was it?
oh, I don't know. It just the separation of labor in a happy marriage is kind of very obvious. I just found it interesting. But it's always important, I think, that we stress on people the importance of getting a permit to build. And I don't know how you do that, because you can't, if people build it and then come to you, what do you do? So, anyway, that's the ZBA report.
Okay, thank you. Item number 6, Downtown Development Authority report, the DPA report.
There was no meeting.
No meeting. And Planning and Zoning report, Mr. Stella.
Those of you who were watching last night would know that Whispering Park cluster development that the Planning Commission recommended approval of unanimously a couple of months ago was approved by council last night. 50 unit cluster development.
Was it unanimous?
Section 11. No, it was 6-1. We also received an application for another cluster development for a school property submitted by the same developer, Mondrian. We received it Friday. I haven't even had a chance to look at it yet.
Which one was that?
That's the one next to the bus garage.
Oh,
A potential
Long Lake,
early,
Long Lake 75.
yeah, potential, it was a potential site for the Early Childhood Learning Center, but there were some issues related to access to the site, and they sold it for residential development purposes to Mondrian. So they've sold or near selling 3 properties, and Mondrian was the winning bid for all the properties.
And isn't there still one more coming up for section 1? I know they've already surveyed the property.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to item number 8, preliminary site plan review, file number SPJPLN 2016-0030, proposed home 2 suites north of Big Beaver, west of Crooks, part of parcel 88-20-476-060, section 20, currently zoned BB, Big Beaver District.
So, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, Mr. Carlisle will present the report in the form of a PowerPoint. And at the end of that, after questions, there's a short film that the applicant submitted. I'd like to play that film.
Sure.
Thank you and good evening. I'm going to use the PowerPoint a lot tonight because this is it's kind of a confusing application, just so everyone can understand the use of graphics here. The site in question is the red site located on the screen. It is an approximately 1.5 acre site, accessed at the dead end of the private section of Wilshire Boulevard. The site is located.
This isn't way here.
Thank you.
This thing weighs 300 pounds.
So security side.
Can everyone see the screen now?
Yes.
Great. The site is located at the dead end of Wilshire, the dead end of the public section of Wilshire Drive. It does continue as a private drive moving to serve this office building. Access will be granted via a shared access at this location as well as shared access on Big Beaver, and I'll talk about more of that in a second. Just for reference, this is the Chipotle/Noodles strip mall that's fronted on Crooks. The site is zoned Big Beaver. It's worth noting this application was submitted prior to the text amendment to require a special use for lodging uses, so hence we are considering this as a site plan application only, which can be approved by the Planning Commission. The site is zoned Big Beaver, and it obviously is surrounded by Big Beaver properties as well as commercial properties within the vicinity. The application before you is a 5-story, approximately 55,000 square feet, 107 extended stay hotel. The application includes shared parking as well as shared access. The hotel itself is outlined in yellow. It's got primary access coming off the shared of Wilshire as well as coming off the shared access on Big Beaver. This is the parking area located around the building, and this is the canopy and access to the primary building entrance. As noticed and for reference, the applicant is providing shared access both off Wilshire and Big Beaver. Just for reference, this is Crooks, this is Big Beaver, this is the Starbucks at the corner of Crooks and Big Beaver. This is the Noodles/Chipotle strip center. The applicant is providing shared access at this point off Wilshire, as well as shared access off Big Beaver behind the big office building off Big Beaver. Shared parking is being located in the areas highlighted here in greenish yellow. The applicant is providing 146 total parking spaces, which exceeds the ordinance requirement. 60 of those spaces are on site. 36 are shared with this strip mall, and 50 are shared with the south office building. In addition, the ordinance requires a loading space for hotel uses. The applicant notes, based on their experience with hotels, they own a number of them both in Troy and Southeast Michigan. They find that they do not need a loading space for this use, and they are seeking a waiver from the Planning Commission for that requirement. The applicant was asked to provide a parking study The parking considered both parking for the hotel as well as parking for the office building as well as parking for the strip development to the east. As noted, there's 146 parking spaces provided. 86 of those are proposed to be shared parking. The parking study noted that peak capacity for the hotel is between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., which are off hours for both the office use and the strip commercial. So based on their study, they do note that there is going to be an excess of approximately 34 parking spaces at peak time for this development. That study was reviewed by the city's traffic consultant, or parking consultant, OHM. They have reviewed the study and they do recommend approval of the shared parking agreement, provided that the Planning Commission approves the site plan itself. They do agree with the methodology and the math that was used to determine the parking. It should be noted that based on OHM study, the three uses, the strip mall, the office, and the hotel, require approximately 507 spaces during peak period, and the applicant is providing, the total is 547 for those three uses. So there is a surplus of approximately 40 spaces at peak time for these three buildings themselves. It's worth noting that the Planning Commission has the authority to grant a shared parking agreement, or you have the right to deny the shared parking agreement based upon the site plan review. One issue that we discussed greatly with the applicant was that of pedestrian access, specifically pedestrian access from the shared parking areas. The applicant has put in a crosswalk from both the south and east shared parking areas. We do note that the crosswalk actually is located in the middle of existing parking spaces or proposed parking spaces, so in reality those will be parked on most times. So that really, that location doesn't warrant a good location. So we were asking the applicant either to remove these parking spaces to provide a better connection and or relocate the crosswalk to a better location so it's not crossing proposed parking spaces. In regards to lighting, trash enclosure, and photometrics, we do note that the applicant is deficient 7 parking lot trees. In regards to trash enclosure, they're proposing a trash enclosure located at this corner of the site. They're proposing to screen it with a 36-inch tall verbatim trees or shrubs and a 10-foot wall masonry screen. We are asking the applicant the need for a 10-foot screen wall, and if it really needs to be 10 feet tall, or it could be reduced in height just simply to screen the trash enclosure, and that should be a point of discussion with the applicant. In addition, we do note that the photometrics provided do exceed the property, the limitation along the property lines, and those need to be addressed moving forward. The applicant has provided colored rendering and colored elevations. This is the view looking. This is Wilshire at this location, so this is looking at the corner. This is Big Beaver. This is the main drop-off area to the site. This elevation is looking essentially from the would be the southeast corner of the site, looking at the primary entrance and drop-off. The upper floor material, I'm sorry, the lower floor materials, that's a mistake, include brick and lowercase as well as cast stone with trim board accents. We do note that the building is highlighted with some significant amount of EIFS relief, including tower elements along all 4 elevations, as well as an EIFS band going across on the side of that elevation. We know that EIFS has been a big discussion with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has considered and recommended draft language in regards to limiting the use of EIFS for accent materials. In our opinion, we do find that the use of EIFS here is more than simply an accent material, and so we are requesting that it be replaced with a more durable, high-quality material moving forward. So in summary, the Planning Commission is to discuss a shared parking agreement, the building placement at 28 feet, as well as the loading space waiver. The Planning Commission, again, has the authority to deny the shared access or approve it as part of the site plan approval. If the Planning Commission does approve the site plan or recommend the shared parking agreement, we are recommending final site plan. We are recommending the following items be addressed for final site plan approval. And this includes the elimination of those parking spaces or the relocation of the crosswalk, provide the additional parking lot trees, confirm that the height of the 10-foot screen wall is necessary for the trash enclosure, reduce the lighting levels below ordinance requirements, reduce the amount of EIFS on the facades, as well as provide a transparency calculation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Yes, Mr. Ortega.
Does the ordinance speak to where or how the interior parking lot trees are to be distributed in the parking?
Planning Commission, so the ordinance requires one tree for every 8 parking lot spaces. Preferably, the parking lot trees are within the parking lot in peninsulas such as this.
Right.
However, the Planning Commission has the authority to accept alternative location to parking lot trees.
Would you interpret the 1 in 8 spots within the row of the number of cars? Like you just pointed out with the island interrupting the parking with the tree.
That's the intent of the ordinance, is that for every 8 parking spaces, there's 1 tree to break up those 8 parking spaces in the form of a peninsula.
So the deficiency is that they haven't put any trees in the shared parking areas. Is that really the essence
Well,
of the...
so when we look at shared parking, we do not recommend or require that they go back and actually rip up existing parking areas and make it into compliance. However, we do think that they should provide the amount of trees that would be required if they were going to provide all the 146 spaces on site. So with that, they're deficient 8 trees on their site. They should put those 8 trees somewhere within their site.
Yeah, it's unusual, though, that the percentage of off-site parking far exceeds the on-site parking, and I think that's probably the issue here. I mean, if there were a handful of off-site parking,
Yeah.
I would get it, but...
We're talking about 7 trees. I think there's space to put 7 trees on within this site somewhere.
Aren't they lose cars? I mean, we're talking about interior parking trees?
Planning Commission has the ability to place require parking lot trees outside the actual parking lot itself.
Okay.
Most times, it's again along the perimeters. These are counted towards parking lot trees, though they're not physically inside the parking lot itself. So the Planning Commission has the ability to put required parking lot trees on the perimeter of the parking lot and/or site to meet those requirements.
Okay.
Any other questions from Mr. Carlin? So considering that the study that was done with all 3 uses, they were actually at a surplus of over 40 lots. Can the request for trees be that they actually remove some of the existing lots on site and replace them with trees and actually increase the number of off-site parking lots and decrease that surplus?
Yeah, so by ordinance requirements, they are based on 107 rooms, and I think it's 5 employees at max employment shift. They're required to have 112 spaces by ordinance. They're providing 146. 60 of those are on-site, 86 are off-site. When you do shared parking, there's always a balancing. Shared parking, you want to be in this close enough proximity to be actually be usable and functional. If the Planning Commission has the authority to put those 8 or 7 trees within the parking area, however, they would have to do more shared parking, which would require them to have parking further away from the front entrance. They wouldn't have to go and amend their agreement to put in more shared parking. They simply would just have more of their parking would be located in the shared spots than actually on site. But the Planning Commission has the authority to require them to put those 8 trees or 7 trees within their parking area, yes.
Okay.
But did you say, Ben, that they are 34, they have an excess of 34 spaces, so.
They have an excess of 34 spaces by ordinance. In totality, if you look at all 3 sites, there are in excess of 40 spaces when you look at all 3 sites.
So when all these uses are at their peak, combined peak,
Right.
there's still an excess of 40 spaces.
But the actual peaks don't necessarily overlap.
They don't coincide because the hotel use is peaking at night and the office and the commercial are peaking during the day.
Which lends itself to shared parking.
Yeah, Mr. Tagle?
Loading space requirements for the Noodles site or the Noodles building. Is there loading space requirements for that building, and are they going to be, is it affected at all about the parking that's going to be in the share agreement?
I did not review that site plan, so I can't speak to when that was constructed. I believe it was constructed under the previous zoning ordinance.
It was.
So I don't know what the loading space requirement is. These are existing parking spaces that they're going to share. So they're not configuring the Chipotle site itself. Is not being configured or reconfigured in any way. It's simply sharing parking that already exists.
I believe loading for the strips, the retail and restaurants to the east takes place at off-peak hours, right in the parking lot.
So the off-peak of the loading of the restaurants could coincide with the peak of the
My guess
hotels.
is deliveries are early in the morning, before they're even open up.
Okay.
I've been there a lot, I've never seen a delivery truck there.
Any other questions? for Mr.
Just a
Cole?
quick
Mr.
thought.
Trent?
Right on the corner of the Starbucks, the parking there has been a sore point. I live in that neighborhood, and it is always difficult to find a parking spot there. I'm just wondering if the same firm that studied that one is the same one that studied this one, because they were way misguessing the amount of parking spaces needed for Starbucks.
So there was no parking study for Starbucks?
No.
Starbucks actually meets the parking requirement for that size restaurant.
Okay.
Not to be out of subject, but Starbucks actually wanted to drive through there, and we said just no
I remember.
drive through there. So.
Okay.
So technically, it meets ordinance.
Yikes.
It's just wildly successful, and has been since it opened.
Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we'll watch the movie and then we'll request that. Come on.
Mr. Butler, could you hit the lights over there?
I can.
Every community, big and small.
Hold on. I tested this thing earlier, too.
Right there.
Every community, big and small, is like a jigsaw puzzle. Each is made up of lots of unique and colorful pieces. And with a little cooperation and a lot of hard work, all the pieces come together to form a bigger picture that we call home. At Group 10, we think of ourselves as an important part of Troy and of every community we invest in. We're a family-owned and totally self-funded company that has been building and managing hotels and other businesses for over 40 years. We've developed millions of dollars in successful, high-quality, full and select service hotels. At Group 10, we guide each project from the ground up. We're completely hands-on. We serve as the owner, contractor, and manager for life. And that's what we'll bring to the city of Troy. Welcome to Home2 Suites by Hilton. This modern, innovative, extended stay hotel is a fresh concept. It consistently receives outstanding reviews on TripAdvisor, Google, and other online travel sites. But a project of this size comes with important questions about its fit and its future. Does Troy really need another hotel? Our Home2 Suites Hotel will be a complementary asset to the city of Troy. Aside from the jobs it will create, this project will provide the area with 107 additional extended stay rooms, which will easily be absorbed into the current market. At present, there are only 4 other extended stay hotels in the area. We know the Home2 Suites will provide an excellent fit for the city of Troy. How will this hotel affect the market? The economic forecast for Troy suggests a rapid and positive growth, as indicated by the hotel study and STAR report provided. This trend will allow for the expansion of not just hotels like ours, but also apartments and retail outlets. As these commercial entities boom and office space quickly fills, a hotel like Home2 Suites will become a valuable complement to this growing and diverse community. Without a diverse hotel component, the city of Troy is incomplete, making visitors and business alike look elsewhere to conduct their business. Can it be retrofitted? If occupancy becomes less than expected, our Home2 Suites hotel can certainly be retrofitted into apartments or condominiums. The hotel box itself is a very adaptable footprint. Should the future need ever arise, these units can easily be turned into apartments, micro-apartments, and even office suites. But truthfully, if the Home2 brand is not as successful as anticipated, this box would most likely turn into another hotel, perhaps of a different style, before it ever becomes something else. How will it look in the future? Home2 Suites by Hilton are modern, attractive, well-designed pieces of architecture. Traditionally, Home 2 suites are constructed of wood, but the Group 10 version is a block and precast structure that is constructed to last for the next 100 years and beyond. But for us, this building is more than just a hotel or brick and mortar. We spare no expense in creating a generational asset we look forward to owning and operating as a business and as a family for decades to come. Because at Group 10, we don't look at the city of Troy as just a thriving market or a valued property. To us, it's a priority, a passion, and we want to play our part in how your future and ours come together. Because with Home 2 Suites, we want this to be our home too.
Thank you. And the applicant is here? Please step up to the mic. Thank you.
Did you click the lights on again, Jim? Thank you.
Hello, how you doing? I'm Kenny Koza, President, Group 10. With me today, I have Jim Butler, PEA, our engineer. You know, I kind of wanted to put that presentation together because I was here recently, and we recently got approved for the TRU on Maple and Stevenson, which, just so you guys know, we have we're in. Our civil engineering plans are in. We got the review. We're addressing them right now. We're hoping to break ground on that in the next probably 3 months. Currently, generally speaking, usually whenever we get a site plan approval, it takes us 3 to 4 months to get our architectural plans going. Obviously, we try not to put the cart before the horse until we get approval. Plans don't fully get developed, and then at that point, you know, usually we start construction about 6 months from site plan approval, and that's kind of our plan with this project. But there were a lot of questions asked at the last hearing, so that's why I kind of put the video together. I can, you know, say things. I feel the video speaks more volumes than how I could address stuff or how I can explain things. I'll tell you everything in the video, with the exception of the Home 2 that's going to be built, hopefully will be built, is our hotels, our project, with the exception of the, you know, Neiman Marcus and the, you know, REI you saw at the end. But the Hampton was ours, the Hilton Gardens ours, the Carrabba's, the Bonefish, the Shopping Center in the middle. That's our project that we've done. I'm not sure if you guys knew that was a Group 10 project or not. We're also, in addition to the TRU that we were approved for, we also got approved recently for the, not recently, last year for the loft. Not to curb till this, I want you to know that I'm actually moving that project. We want to do that project. We'll go through with that project, but I'm actually moving it to a different site. The site has a problem, not to get into that, but just want you to know we are committed to these projects, and I want you to understand that, you know, when we get approval, we take these things seriously. I don't want you to think if we get approved tonight, this project would stall. It's not. Our intentions are to obviously move as quickly as possible through the approval process and the review process and to build this thing. We're very committed to the Hilton family, as we have the Hampton and the Hilton Garden in currently. And, you know, we went to a great length to make that video and to get all the reports that the city wanted and was requesting, and to kind of, you know, overcome any concerns. So I provided star reports, about the market overview, custom star reports that showed how, you know, an additional hotel would affect the other hotels in the market, as well as I provide a star report that just honed in on the extended stay brand itself. And that's another thing. This is an extended stay hotel. So the average stay isn't 1 night or 2 night, it's 1 week or 2 weeks. You have people who stay here 6 months to a year. It's got a vast broad of clients and people it's trying to attract. It even is a, you know, a sanctuary for those who might, you know, have suffered from fire or flood or even divorce, looking for a temporary place. The parking requirement is not a concern to us at all. I also, over the time period of working with the city, I showed plenty of reports, you know, just showing you how the decrease of rental car business is being suffered by rideshare and Lyft and Uber and all sorts of things. We think that the shared parking is very close proximity to our entrance. If need be, I personally don't think we're ever going to even occupy our current parking lot. That's how confident I am that everybody's going to be using alternative means than using an actual car and parking there an extended length of time. I'm not at all concerned. We would never, us or Hilton would never put ourselves in a situation where we would ever jeopardize the success of the hotel by limiting ourselves to the parking. It's a huge requirement of the brands, huge requirement of ours. As a developer, And being born and raised in Michigan and leaving Michigan and coming back, it's always been a goal of mine to develop in Troy. We've, as developer, we don't really just jump in. We've actually looked at Troy for 10 years, studied Troy for 10 years before we even did our first project. When we decide on doing a project in the city, we don't just, it's really not, obviously our game is to be profitable, but for us as a family, and people tell me all the time, why don't you go to Chicago and New York? And we could obviously do that. But really, there's something to be said with knowing, the corner of Crooks and Big Beaver. I was born and raised here. I don't know other cities or other areas as well as I do this one. So when we hone in on the area and we find that we love an area, we really invest it all. So we actually try to, we don't look at areas for just developing one thing. And I don't want to bore you, but the Romulus Market, I'll give you an example. We're actually next summer going to break ground on our 8th hotel there. We love Romulus. We've been in Romulus a long time. So our roots started there. And so, once we kind of are certain, know a market and know our clients, we hear our clients, we ask them what they want, and we then try to deliver to them the needs that they're missing out in the city. I'm also on the DDA. I'm not sure if you guys know that or not. And the objective of the DDA is, one, we hone in on the Big Beaver corridor. It's our prime area that we discuss. Another thing is that we try to figure out ways to eliminate parking, which I don't have a sea of parking. And lastly, we want height. And I'll tell you, I believe in monkey see, monkey do, and which is why you see my Hilton Garden Inn is 5 stories. My True is a 5-story product. My Hampton is a 5-story product. So I know one of the questions was, why did we increase the room size from 90 to 107? Truthfully, 90 rooms is a small hotel for us. We never wanted it to be 90, but we were getting kickback on the parking, and we didn't have some of this shared parking secured when it originally came in front of you guys. And our original proposal was a 4-story hotel, and we really wanted it to be 5. We feel the 5 is the new look of what hospitality should be. I consider a 3-story hotel to be outdated. You will never catch me building a 3-story hotel. And really 5-story is really my new rule of thumb. We just feel that you're able to build a much better structure being block and plank, not a wood structure. We don't try to cheap out on our assets or developing of them. We know we get out of it what we put into it. And so therefore, that's why we're actually constructing it, of a 5-story block and plank building. Now, if you want more brick, I'm happy to add more brick. I'm happy to add more trees. I'm very flexible. The dumpster enclosure, I think, was accidental 10 feet because the generator enclosure is 10 feet to kind of cover the height of the generator. The generator is 10 feet tall. It sits on top of a diesel tank, which is why it's so tall. The dumpster, we can obviously make it 6 feet, 7 feet, whatever it needs to be to enclose it. The crosswalk where you see we have from the shared parking areas, I'm pretty sure, but don't quote me, we didn't count those parking spaces in our parking study, correct? Yeah, they're not counted in our parking study. So technically there's 2 extra parking spaces. So you could landscape them, you could put an island there. They're not counted in our study. Nothing would change by doing that. And so, we really believe in the city of Troy. Obviously, we wouldn't be investing into a $12 million hotel. We wouldn't want to also take away from our own lion's share of our property. We know that this kind of is its own separate brand within itself. They're actually just built one in Sterling Heights. So really, it's one of those things where, if the product exists in the adjacent city, you're going to lose a lot of people who want to stay at home too, who are in that price point, or who Hilton themselves has made them loyal to that brand, and they're going to go to the adjacent city instead of coming to Troy. And I don't want to see that. I'm not an investor in Sterling Heights. I'm an investor in Troy, and I do have a great investment in making sure Troy does well. So I think that's pretty much all for my presentation. Unless you got any questions for the civil engineer.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I do have boards here for the materials and things, if you wanted to see them.
Yes, please pass them around if they're...
I'll carry them around.
Yeah.
Because they don't light enough, but... Very nice.
Thank you, Mr. Butler.
Yeah, got it. So, add a little way for that to go around. The cross access for the pedestrian walk areas, I'd like to see that permanent, to eliminate that part, those 2 parking spots entirely. Greenery, I realize it's pretty tight with any greenery in there, but something to absolutely make that unoccupiable by a vehicle.
Okay, I'm completely fine with that.
Have you considered putting the pedestrian crosswalks between the two islands instead of heading pedestrians straight into the parking lot? Is that something that was considered in?
It was considered, I think, we had to meet a certain amount of landscaping, and therefore we didn't want to take out another island. But we definitely, I personally wanted that, but again, we have to meet a certain amount of greenscape. I think that's, correct, Ben?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Taylor?
I applaud the cross access and the shared parking so we don't have more than 2 minutes. My big concern with this layout is the exit out to Big Beaver. It's going to be treated by people that stay in the hotel as almost as a semi-road, and this is a parking lane. And I'm concerned that just the potential, number one, of accidents or people walking through the parking area with whatever rate of speed people may be exiting or incoming off of Big Beaver. Secondly, it appears that based on your design, you're going to require the trucks that are picking up the trash to use that same path. Is that correct?
They can actually, well, I think that'd be a question, but I believe they can pick it up from our angle as well.
I would.
It'd be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I would think. So the question is that pavement designed to handle the weight of those trucks?
Actually, so that's a good question. In our agreement with the Raymond Building, we're actually putting in a new lane that would accommodate heavy traffic.
So you're redoing the
Yeah, it's part of our agreement with them. I have to give them a new road.
And is that, I mean, you're not talking about just blacktop, you're talking about taking out.
I'm taking it out, yep. I'm going to put in a new rock base, and then I'm going to asphalt back over.
Heavy duty pavement sections of what you would find.
Right.
For truck access.
Yep.
Well,
It was a concern that came up with them and as well as us, because we know I was concerned about their amount of traffic coming through our hotel. But being that we have completely opposite times of use, we were happy to accommodate each other in terms of our flow, because I believe a lot of their people are going to love coming out onto Crooks to be able to use the light to make a left.
well, you can't turn left, I think you have to go through Crooks, make a U-turn.
Or, or that, yes. Michigan left. There you go.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you considered the deeper strength bituminous and heavier pavement.
Yep.
I'm still concerned with that being more of a drive lane now for your occupants, as opposed to what it is now just for the parking. And if you're going to that extent with the paving, our discussion earlier about where we put the trees, the interior parking lot trees, you know, if we have to cut up a spot for a parking lot in someone else's, you know, in the adjacent lots, I don't see that as a huge additional cost. You're going to be doing a lot of paving work, and expensive paving work, if you're going to tear it up and put new base in it. So again, as opposed to putting all the trees on your lot, you know, would it be considered to maybe break up some of the asphalt, you know, on the adjacent properties, and, you know, drop in some of those 7 deficient trees in there?
You know, that's something I can discuss with them. I couldn't tell you. I mean, we're really just tearing up the drive lane. We're not really messing with any of their parking spaces.
I understand that.
But I would have to ask them if they were willing to give up one of their parking spaces for any greenery.
Well, you've got an excess of, is it 7 or 40?
34 for
You
us.
have an excess of
40
44
for
parking spaces, so.
So what you're saying, Mr. Tagle, is that adding a tree or two along that drive aisle exiting to Big Beaver would help the slow traffic?
Well, that as well, but if you look at the Raymond parking lot, there's nothing in there as far as landscape. It's all asphalt. And so what I'm saying is maybe we could soften that landscape with strategically placing some of the shortage of trees on that property. But again, that may help with the calming, the traffic calming, but I don't know, maybe there needs to be some other considerations for that, because I just am concerned with that long route or drive aisle, you know, people, because, well, I guess anybody who gets in that lane is going to be wanting to get to Big Beaver as quickly as they can. And there are pedestrians crossing there. There are no identified crosswalks. So I think there's some concern there from a safety standpoint.
What is that aisle width right now, Mr. Or, you know, the actual cross access, is that a typical width of a parking lot, 23 to 24 feet? Do we have that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I believe, given the fact, Mr. Butler, if he doesn't, know, do you know what?
I do not understand that.
So this site was, fairly recently, there was an addition on this site, and it went through site plan review. I'm fairly confident that it's a 24-foot dry well, standard.
I just measured off GIS, and it looks like it's about 24 feet.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I just one quick
Yeah, Mr.
follow-up. Thank you for saying that you could eliminate those 2 parking spots on your property, but as soon as they get to the other property, there could be a car sitting right in front of them. Maybe since you are working with the other 2 properties, that parking spot, I hate removing parking spots, but it would make it really identifiable as an inn to your new hotel. If the parking spot parallel or adjacent, adjacent to the, it could be removed so that it really becomes a real visible walkthrough. And just a thought. I mean, we can't require you to do that. You meet the requirements, but I'm just saying if you could talk with the other 2 and see, since you're already doing paving work, maybe that could.
I'm happy to talk with them.
It would welcome more people, you know what I'm saying?
I agree with that. I'm happy to talk to them. I can tell you to, ease some of your concerns is that on our project where we have our Hilton Garden in Hampton, we have what we call a skeleton going down the center, which is a complete pathway to the shopping center. And there are really no entry points into the sidewalk. People park right up to the curb, they walk up on top of it, and they walk over, and it's caused no problems, no trip hazards, no problem during the winter time. I haven't had any slip and falls or anything like that. So I feel like people kind of are accustomed to that, especially, Troy, we're trying to be a little more urban, and we feel this is more of an urban design, but I can definitely talk to the Raymond people. I'm not opposed to obviously taking up one of their spaces and making it more easily accessed. I just can't speak on their behalf, unfortunately. But I can tell you that even without it, though, we feel that people are very much accustomed to stepping over a curb and walking onto it.
Is part of your agreement with the property to the south to put a sign at Big Beaver for your hotel?
They have allowed me to put a sign there. I have to come in front of the ZBA for that.
BCBA, Building Code Board of Appeals.
Yes.
Is that also true on Wilshire?
Our sign is going to be kind of not on Wilshire. It'll be more towards our kind of entrance that we share with the shopping center in the back. Yep, right there where he's got it. Mm-hmm.
So I noticed on one of the plans, the arrow stopped on the west side of that turnaround. So is it east of that, the Wilshire turnaround?
So
Go up, yeah, right there.
This
What's
is,
east of, is that a public road east of it or private drive?
this section of Wilshire, right where my red
Right.
hand is, that's public. From this point on is private to serve this office building. That is why Mr. Koza does not have direct access to Wilshire, only through the shared access.
How many people do you think are going to miss that turnaround when they're looking at the sign that's further down, further west of the drive that goes, actually it'll get them to the hotel, and it'll have to go down the private drive and make a U-turn and come back?
I think it depends on how up-to-date their navigation system is on their phone.
Or how closely they're watching.
Yeah, Mr.
What about snow removal? Where does the snow get piled up?
On our available landscape areas.
Is that to the west part of the side of the building, or?
Yeah, on the, let's see, that's the west, yep, west, a little bit on the east, and obviously towards the building.
It probably won't be a problem if there's 34 extra spaces anyway, then.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, the lawyer's going to speak. In my years of doing this, I find that the shared parking agreements and the cross-access easements are always an afterthought. it sounds like you've had some preliminary discussions with the two property owners, but can you just tell me, are there going to be times that the parking is going to be restricted? Are there going to be signs? I mean, you've thrown in now the fact that you're going to have a road built. Are there any other details that you can?
No, there's no times. I mean, we have different peak hours than they do, so they're allowed to access through our property, we're allowed to access through theirs. I mean, the property to the east was purchased from the shopping center developer, so that came when we bought the property. And with the Raymond building was a negotiation we did after the fact, when it came in front of the city. We got turned down with the 90 rooms due to parking, so that's where we went in and acquired the additional parking for Raymond.
I mean, Mr. Sabanant, you'll have to present the agreements and the easements, cross-access easements before final review, so just don't keep it an afterthought.
No, it's contingent upon being approved tonight.
Okay, thank you.
So the city attorney has to worry about the details of the parking agreement prior to final approval. So ideally, Julie would like this upon submitting of the application. She'd like an ironclad agreement that we've got in our hands.
Because by my way of thinking, this is actually short, 52 spots. I mean, I know that you're all thinking different, but from my perspective, it's deficient by 52. Mr. Koza says, in his opinion, he's not even going to use the 60 that he has, but.
So our agreement it's a lock and clad agreement upon approval.
So you've got no worries about the being able to deliver a shared parking agreement for the two properties that the city attorney's office will be comfortable with?
Correct.
Would it be appropriate to have some type of a preliminary draft submitted so that, for example, if there are items that we're going to ask this petitioner to come back and show us, such as different elevations, that at that time the city attorney would have had a chance to look at it and at least have comment about it, as opposed to waiting till the very end? I mean, that may expedite, actually for you, shorten the time frame.
Yes, it could be an issue, a condition of you have the right to do the shared parking agreement, you have the right to look at the agreement as part of it, the shared parking agreement. So yes, you can ask that. Again, it wouldn't be signed, executed, and finalized until.
It's a draft.
Yep.
Yeah.
It would give the city attorney an opportunity to look at it, and if they have comment,
Yeah, there may be a red flag that no one sees until you go through this process, so then they can't get final because they can't get the parking agreement.
Can I just follow up on something you just said? Did I hear you say that you purchased lots to the east?
No, our property was purchased from the shopping center owner.
Oh, okay. Your property that you're
Building the home two on, correct.
As part of that, there's 36 parking spaces that's on that shared.
So that was acquired when we bought the land, and then the Raymond building was something we recently negotiated with them.
Okay. Mr. Edmonds.
I was intrigued by your offer to use less EFS. I would certainly be interested if you could clarify that more. I don't know if you know that our new standards are going to be, EFS can only be used as an accent. And so you said something about you could put more brick or other durable material.
I mean, currently the EFS on the building is at 40%. It's actually in line with what we did at our previous projects. In any area where I can possibly change it to reduce the amount of EFS, I'm happy to do that. Obviously, EFS does add a nice kind of texture and color. It breaks up the building a little bit. I know a lot of people have a bad connotation with EFS, but it's come a long way in the last 40 years. They created a drainable system. It's not stuck directly on anymore. It's kind of been manufactured to last at least 50 years. So this is something, obviously, we know that in the next 50 years we would replace it, either do EFS again, or at that point we could also look at a different material. But I'm happy to, upgrade any of the materials to be able to get this project approved. That's how committed we are to wanting to do this.
Mr. Carlisle, is that something that we can request for revised elevations with the details?
You have options. You could either approve it and let staff administratively deal with these issues. You could table the matter and have them come back and submit revised plans based on your discussion tonight.
Now, in the sake of trying to get approved tonight, I mean, would 20% EFS be an acceptable amount?
I like 15.
Don't play poker with this guy.
I do like your hotels, by the way.
Thank you.
I guess 20% is a considerable reduction, but the question that goes along with that is also, where is that reduction, right? 20%.
So where there's EFS currently, I would match it with the same color to keep in line with the Home 2 look, because that's really what they're particular about. They want consistency and continuity between the brand. They want to make sure it's identifiable. So anywhere where I have the EFS, I would just change it to a matching masonry color. So it'd still look like that.
Of what material, though?
So of masonry, it'd be brick.
Oh, brick.
Brick, yeah.
So you would buy blue glazed brick, you say?
If I had to.
Sure would look nice.
It would.
Right across the street. is what I
So
want.
are the
Yeah.
towers, are you proposing the towers remain EFS and everything else that's EFS be modified to brick, converted to brick?
Yeah, you know, the top banding should stay as EFS just because of load and structural integrity and things of that nature. But this element right here can be clearly done out of white brick. There's no problem with that. I mean, after doing some calculations, I would have to almost tell you if I needed to do this. It'd be this and the other one might be the most accentable or identifiable elements of the Home 2. So I would try to stay away from changing those, but I'm sure if I needed to, I can get blue brick to just look like that. So I'm pretty confident if you were to approve me with only 20% EFS, I could manage, you know, and make it still look like that building.
I don't want to be difficult about this, but this is a visual thing. And to sit here and to try to decide what does 15% or 18% or 20% look like, I'm opposed to. I mean, if we're asking the petitioner to reduce the percentage of EFS, it's up to him to come back to us, in my opinion, and to show us how he's going to do that. And I'm opposed to saying, hey, take it down to 15. Why not 14? And who's going to prove that it's 14%? Is somebody going to sit down there and do the calculation? I guess what I'd like to do is I'd like to see what he's going to propose. And again, I have nothing against the project. I think the project is going to work. But again, there are a number of things on the list that I feel personally as a planning commissioner, I'd like to see what the resolution or the change is going to be.
Now, sorry if I asked, but aren't I within ordinance with having 40% EFS? Aren't I allowed that? I'm pretty sure.
The Planning Commission has drafted language that talks about the use of EFS as a accent material. It's within their purview to dictate the architectural requirements, including material use. So it's in their purview to recommend changes to this material use.
I guess also just to piggyback on that, I heard some discussion, and I heard you voluntarily or certainly offer to reduce the percentage of EFS, but I think the Planning Commission does have an interest in seeing what that, at least one member, they make decisions by resolution.
Sure.
But at least one member has indicated they'd like to see what that looks like visually versus, you know, it's one thing to talk about the math, it's another to talk about the visuals, and so they do have. I think it is a reasonable dialogue based on what we discussed in the last few minutes.
Mr. Edmonds?
I agree. How quickly could you do this? Could you be back at the next meeting?
Yeah, but I prefer to be approved tonight.
Sure. I know. Well, we are and you're aware of that. We only have 5 commissioners here. Six.
You need 5 votes.
Yeah.
5 more. We haven't heard from some of the members, so I'm not sure where.
I can tell you EFS is actually an incredible, beautiful material. It does break up the building very nicely, offers a different kind of contrast and element to it. It's, you know, it's a material that, reason why we use it is it actually makes the building look very pretty. I mean, just to be, you know, all masonry is kind of, you know, it's kind of stale. It's not very warm. So, and I prefer to have EFS over siding or hardy board or any of those type of materials. So,
I think we've discussed at this table the merits of EFS, And yes, it's a doable material, but it's a very inexpensive material, and that's why most developers choose to use it. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done in a creative way, but when this commission sets forth the requirement that it's an accent material, in my opinion, 40% coverage of a building is an accent material. If you choose to use masonry, that's your choice. And if you think that masonry is not a contemporary-looking material, again, that's an opinion you share. There are other materials out there if you choose to bring forth other materials.
I just like the look of EFS personally, so.
I think reducing from 40 to 20 or to 40 to 15, before we approve, we'd like to see where that reduction is occurring in terms of elevation, in terms of location, in terms of the final product, the final look, and how that variety of material is in contrast to where you're putting the accent as in terms of EFS. Yes, Mr. Evans?
I would agree with you very wholeheartedly, but we all know that time is money too, and I'm concerned for this developer who I think has done a quality job with other hotels that they've built in Troy. Mr. Savin, how soon would they have to have it before our next meeting, which is because you have to have time to review it. Does it have to go through the whole same approval process internally? Is it?
If it's addressing the EFS question as well as the issues identified in the report, I don't think we'd have to circulate it internally. But we would need to provide time to Mr. Coase as architect and engineer to make the appropriate changes to get them back to us to review it. We are pretty quick. I think we're as quick as any community out there, if not the quickest out there. We'll do our best, but to time you to a date, we'll do our best to get them on the next available meeting.
Well, we know when the next meeting is. How many days before that do you have to have it in your office? That's my point. To still be able to.
We need a.
It usually comes out on Friday for the.
Yeah, we try not to play this.
So the next meeting is June 12th. My review has to be complete to Brent's office by the 6th, so I would need at least a week, so we're talking about basically a week, over a week.
Can I say something, just my observation? I mean, comes down, obviously, you guys want to see what this thing looks like from the architectural standpoint. I know there's some other items related to landscaping. Those are things that are pretty definable and simple. Obviously, it's what it looks like and where it looks like and what it does look like. I mean, could not a motion be made related to making this conditional on us coming back with that revised architectural plan, showing what that building looks like? So the process for Mr. Koza can continue. That's all, it's a timing issue.
Mr. Carlos, Mr. Sullivan, conditional, I mean, that would change the.
Mr. Hamilton, if
Yes.
I may, I've been silent, but maybe this is the time to speak up. There's another issue that I've got some reservations on, and that's the parking study. This parking study assumes that the peak for parking in the hotel, 11 o'clock at night through 6 a.m. in the morning, completely ignores the fact that we've got a shopping area, retail sales using that parking lot throughout the night. And I can't believe that all these tenants in this hotel are going to wait till 11 o'clock at night to park their cars. They're going to be there early afternoon or early in the evening. So I think the parking study is insufficient. With this shared parking, I think we're creating another traffic jam that we've tried to avoid in some other projects. So I'm not really happy with that. So if you're going to do a conditional, if you're considering that, I want you to put the parking in there also as a problem, at least for me. I've got one vote, but that's a problem for me.
Are you suggesting that we add the parking as a condition In what way?
I'm saying, it's a problem for me with the study the way it is, because I think they've ignored a great gap in time in trying to reach an agreement that the shared parking is going to work. I don't think it's going to work that well. That's my own personal opinion, at least from what I've seen in the report.
In the first paragraph of the intro, it says that the hotel will typically arrive the guests will typically arrive between 5 p.m. and leave prior to 9 a.m. Really, the 11 p.m. peak is just meaning most of my guests will already been checked in, and that's generally is when my peak is. Everyone usually is checked in by 11 p.m. They do start, the check-in time is 3 p.m. and so the most people do start arriving past 5 p.m. because usually that's when they're off of work or they just arrive or for whatever that matter. So they're coming when the office people are leaving at 5, and therefore usually by 11 p.m. is why the study shows it's the peak, is because majority of my customers would have been checked in, and that is when the parking lot would be most full. But you're talking about maybe 10 people arriving at 5:30, another 10 between 6 and 7, another 10 between 7 and 8, and so on and so on. This isn't like a party store or anything like that. There are no rushes in our business. They consistently come through. The most amount of people that check in at a time are generally always under 10 people. And if they're 10 people, they usually came together, and that's usually be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 cars tops. There really, I don't see a traffic jam happening. Again, we wouldn't have wanted this project, nor our study would have reflected that, and we would have done something different.
I have not seen the study. I can't comment one way or the other.
Was the study not circulated? Because we provided it.
Are you referring to the parking study?
Yes.
So the parking study that was included in this?
No, there's a summary in our report.
No, the complete study was provided to the city.
Well, not to me.
Well, I think we did. I thought we did get the parking study. It was a report
Right.
that OHM approved.
Well, there's a conclusion that OHM approved. I didn't see any basic facts in OHM or anybody. We've got an opinion by OHM, sort of rubber stamping the park study submitted by the developer. I've not seen that. All I'm relying upon is there is a conclusion drawn, but no facts underneath that to substantiate that conclusion. Now, it may be there, but I haven't seen it.
Well, that's fair, and I think that, that could be part of the,
So, Mr. Savanat, is there additional data that was submitted as part of the parking study that was not included in this report? That Mr.
No, this is,
Hudson is referring to, or this is the complete study?
this is the study.
Okay, so we have the complete study.
I think it's inconclusive for me then.
So, in terms of the parking study, I think what we have is we have Flights and Hindenburg that did the study, and then OHM confirmed the data and the study, so we
we
have.
need to see that OHM, we need that evidence.
So I'm saying there was a conclusion, but we don't know on which it was based. No raw facts, no data as to cars, hours, and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's my opinion. I'm one man here, but I wanted you to hear my thoughts.
So are we missing something here, Mr. Savanat? Is that, if that's a complete data, that's a complete
This is the
information?
parking study that was
That's the parking
provided
study.
by Fleiss and Vanderbrink.
Okay. Mr. Hudson, are you requesting additional information?
I'm just saying, with what I've seen, I'm not convinced.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Cooper?
Was it with the IHOP that we had additional data that they provided us for their parking? Can we request something like that around this?
So the methodology was agreed upon by the city engineer and the city's consultant. That was the methodology that was applied to this. The methodology and data was reviewed and approved by our engineer and our traffic consultant, and they agree with the findings of this.
And if you'll remember, I objected at that time on the same reasoning.
Yes.
So neither myself nor respectfully, Mr. Hudson, neither myself nor Mr. Carlisle are traffic experts, so we defer to our in-house engineer.
Well, I understand that.
Who defers to our
That's not
consultant.
a criticism of you, or, yeah.
Yeah. So we defer to the consultant's recommendation, which is agreeing with this.
I think this is another case, another application that we have before us where we have the same scenario as in the past where we have a parking study that was done by a consultant, verified by another consulting company, confirmed by the city engineer as a thorough study, and that the data and the results and the conclusion is based on the industry standard way of doing a parking study. So if we actually are looking for something more, then we would have to request, backtrack and ask the city engineer to ask the OHM and ask the original consultant to provide something else, and I'm not sure we would get anything else than what we just have here
I
tonight.
can tell you in the lawsuit, this would be inadmissible based on a conclusion. They would have to do a foundation showing the facts on which they acted, how they did it, what the methodology was, how they then came to their conclusion. This is not a lawsuit, but the same principle applies in my mind.
So I think maybe the methodology, and it's spelled out right there, the Urban Land Institute, I think that's the methodology. So the detailed methodology comes from that, that document or that actual publication. And that if any of us want to actually go into that detail of what the methodology is in terms of peak hours, and I think that publication is available if any of us want to do that, but I think that's beyond the scope of what we have here tonight.
That's a burden I don't think we have to bear. It should be presented to us, not that we've got to drag it out from somewhere.
Any other?
My piece. I'm done at this point. You know how my feelings are.
Mr. Edmonds, any other comments?
No, the only comment I would make on that, we've always taken the urban land institute to a very respectable and trustworthy source. So I don't share Mr. Hudson's. Well, I do respect him as a lawyer, so I mean, you've raised.
Take my advice then.
Well, we don't have 5 votes here anyway, so there's no way we can do this tonight. But I think we need to give good guidance and direction.
Okay.
And I don't see why, for the next meeting, that the staff needs a huge amount of time to review this. If they submit the drawings and the artist renderings or whatever to show the EFS and everything, those can just be emailed to us. We don't have to wait until the actual packet comes out for the next meeting. It's going to be sent to us for review, and if we have any flags, that's time for people to speak up.
Ms. Cooper.
I would prefer to postpone because I would like to see the elevations. I don't want that as a condition, because if we approve it and then the elevations come back and we don't like them, then what happens? I would rather wait.
Okay. Then I think we're ready for a motion, or are we?
So
Not yet.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. So the report identified some issues, listed them. Traffic, the parking study was not one of those issues. So our report assumes we agree with the findings of the study. We have at least one member who's concerned. To provide direction, to clarify this, whether a majority feels that this is an issue or just one planning commissioner, because again, we speak in resolution, would it be appropriate to identify if there's a consensus related to the concern related to the traffic study? The reason I bring that up is if a majority of the planning commission feels that there's an issue with the traffic study, we could have their experts, Fleiss and Brandenbrink, appear at the next meeting in 3 weeks and identify that. However, if there's not consensus, then we put it behind us and we move on.
Sure. Can we see if we have consensus? I'd like to see if we have consensus to leave the items that were brought up in the report as is, and that we agree, that we have consensus that the parking study is adequate. And that, yes, Mr. Taylor?
I would like to add to the items the draft copy of the easement agreements. So what you just said was to leave the items as is for the parking study. I just want to make sure, in my opinion, I'd like to see a draft, or at least allow the city attorney's office to take a look at the draft so that can be discussed next time the petitioner's in front of us.
Okay.
If there are
Shared
any-
parking and cross easement.
Right.
So shared parking and cross easement, but do we have consensus that the study, based on those agreements, is adequate? The parking study based on those agreements, yes.
I would say that I'm satisfied. However, since there are others who are not present, and I know that there will be questions there could be potentially questions from other members, I would recommend that the parking consultant is present at the next meeting.
Any other thoughts on the parking
And
study?
that's fine, just being present, I don't think it's going to satisfy Mr. Hudson's and probably several other people who are not here tonight. I think there's got to be a lot more raw data. That's why I'm hearing Mr. Hudson say.
You might as well be prepared. We've got 3 missing members, too. I don't know which way they're going, but they may have some concerns, they may not. If we're going to postpone it, which I think consensus is going to be to postpone it, they've got it right when they come here to stick their 2 cents worth in, even though we may have discussed it. So, nothing's written in stone.
So we're adding the parking study raw data. Is that the way to phrase it?
I guess I'd like to see some presentation on their data in which they base their conclusion these peak hours were such that there's not going to be a mixing of traffic, so that we won't have 2 uses, the retail shopping and the hotel guests, all merging in that parking lot at the same time.
So what I'm hearing is that we are requesting the traffic engineer representative from the consultant to be present to actually provide more detail on that, of the presentation.
Yeah.
Not to be given more raw data by anybody else, but the.
Answer the question. Why did you pick 11 to 6 and ignore maybe the traffic in the shopping center in those periods of time? It looks like we got one set of standards for the hotel and sort of a vacancy over here, but somebody drew a conclusion that won't be a problem.
So I'm wondering, our report was 13 pages, and actually our report addresses actually the lunch traffic. Not only did I address the lunch traffic, we also took a study of all the other hotels in Troy, specifies it in our report, where I actually paid for the Fleiss and our traffic engineer to sit in the parking lots during these hotels during lunchtime, because we wanted to see the exact peak of all the others, to kind of populate half our data. So our data actually, it's very extensive. It shows all the hours of operation of all the businesses. In addition, it shows the other hotels in the Troy market and how they park. So, it's 13 pages. I'm wondering, did that not circulate?
That wasn't in our report.
Okay, obviously I'm not the one who circulates it to you guys, only deliver it to the city, so.
Complete and everything.
Yeah, so that's why I'm a little puzzled about the parking even being a stipulation or a problem.
Just for clarification, the 13-page study you're referencing was in the packet.
Thank you.
So if there's anything more above that 13 pages, I don't know if that was submitted to the city.
So in my 13 pages, it shows all the hours of operation of the retail, when the peak hours are, when it's saying my hotel's check, when it's coming in, when they start. It says right there in the first intro paragraph, 5 p.m. They start coming and arriving.
Start in the packet starts on page 33
Yes.
and concludes on page 46.
Because, the city's traffic consultant went back and forth with our consultant many times, as well as with OHM, which is what led us to go to Raymond for extra parking. And then which also led for us to, pay for studies to sit in these hotels' parking lots and actually count them. This has not been a cheap study. This was not a once for all. This actually, I think I paid for a total of 11 studies. This is the most expensive parking study I've ever encountered.
See that on page 35.
page 33, I think. Was it 33, Ben?
Start on page 33, and it ends on, their study ends on page 30, or 45.
Yeah, it's all there.
Oh, I missed that then. I apologize if I eat up on everybody in 5 or 10 minutes and the report was in there. I did not see that.
I did remember seeing it, but since I'm not a traffic expert, don't ever intend to or want to be.
I mean, I'd literally be a crazy person if I was going to invest $12 million plus without land into the city of Troy, and I was going to jeopardize the business by not having sufficient parking.
Just one other thing I wanted to say that, you know, this is an extended stay hotel. I don't think I've ever been on, I don't know if any of you all have ever been on the planning commission when we approved an extended stay. That was long before I was on, but it's a different type of resident that picks these. It's a different purpose, and I tend to agree with Mr. Koza that, you know, a lot of these people may be just coming in a cab. You know, so they're not really parking.
Another thing I'd like to quickly add about the materials, I know you guys want to see what it looks like in brick. Now, obviously, this is just a colored computer printout. So when I come in front of you, unfortunately, it's going to look exactly the same, literally the exact same. It won't look any different. You can't tell which is brick and which is EIFS right now. No. Not unless I make it look like it's not going to look and add lines for you. But truthfully, that's exactly what it's going to look like. Even if I change any of these EIFS features to masonry, this elevation is going to stay the same. I have to keep it the same. It has to be a Home 2. It's a Home 2 by Hilton. This is their requirement. This is the continuity they provide. It is not going to change one bit. All it's going to do is be more masonry instead of EIFS. But I mean, I'm happy to come in front of you guys again, but I'm going to tell you this is what it's going to look like. This is what I'm going to bring with me.
How about the tower down there?
Tower, I mean, if you want me, I'm going to...
It's just going to be white brick.
Be white brick.
See, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem if you made the blue glazed brick like we have on the Children's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And a white brick on the other tower type structures. If you agree with that, I'm ready to say yes tonight. As far as, that's my opinion.
I'm sorry, you wanted the green to be also masonry as well, you said?
The green stripe?
Oh, the green stripe?
Yeah, well, yeah, you can throw some green brick in there.
Sure.
And as far as that very tippy top thing, it could be EIFS, you know, that's...
Top portion, accent, you got it.
Well, I think Mr. Tagel's on, so we don't have 5 votes to get this through tonight anyway.
So I think by just saying that you're changing EIFS to brick doesn't really give us a full picture of all the elevation.
No, I just don't want to disappoint anybody when I come back and I bring them the same elevation. I'll reprint it with the masonry on it, but I'm going to tell you it's going to look identical. It's a computer printout, unfortunately. I don't, you know, without building you a model, it's not going to look much different.
Well, what we can do is we can actually just vote on the existing resolution tonight and see if we're moving forward. And if we need to, we would have a revised resolution and take another vote. We can do that. Can we do that?
So,
Or-
there's a resolution. Who made the resolution?
No one
So there's not a resolution.
The resolution, if the resolution's made and it fails, we can redraft a resolution.
Redraft the
That's
resolution.
That's the question.
Redraft a resolution to postpone or whatever the resolution might be. Is that
If that resolution to postpone fails, you redraft a new resolution.
Okay. Do we have consensus to just vote on the resolution that's on the agenda tonight?
So that was the issues identified in the report.
Correct.
So postponement, is that correct? So whoever, when we talked about the resolution, someone needs to restate it again, because it's been 10 minutes since we talked about it.
There's probably other conditions that need to be added here, right? That we've talked about.
The two that came
Wouldn't
up.
it be simpler just to move to postpone?
Except that costs some money.
Yeah, I mean, time is money, but, you know, this building's gonna be here for hopefully 25 or 30 years, and,
Well, I hope it's
So
there for
what?
100 years, but
well, okay. I don't think we're going to be bullied into doing it tonight because the construction season's starting.
Mr. Hudson, would you like to move a resolution?
No.
No, thanks.
I think I'm in the minority at this table, and I'm not going to want to screw things up by doing something which may be voted down.
I could
Mr. Grant?
move it if you...
Sure.
Okay. Resolve that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Home to Suites Hotel north of Big Beaver, west of Crooks, parcel 88-20-20-476-060, section 20, within the Big Beaver district, granted subject to the following. One, either eliminate the parking spaces that are proposed for the crosswalks. Pardon? Okay, that's it? Okay, yeah. Provide additional parking lot trees. Confirm the height of a 10-foot screen wall is necessary to screen trash enclosure, or reduce the height as necessary. Reduce the lighting levels below the ordinance requirement as set forth in section 13.05. I'm going to leave that one out and say replace the EVIS on the towers, the tower structures, and there's no other better way for me to define that, but the blue areas and the white areas to be replaced, replace the EVIS with masonry products and provide transparency calculation.
And then wasn't there two more things?
Cross-access agreement and...
Oh, yes.
Draft of the cross-access
Provide
agreements.
a draft of the cross-access parking agreement.
Plural.
Agreements, yes, thank you. You're right, there are two. Anything else to add?
Yeah, and I'll add.
Can we specify
Are-
that the applicant has offered reduction of the EFIS down to 20%? Can we include that? Not just those towers? The reduction of the EFIS down to 20%?
I don't think we should get into the percentage.
No, I'm gonna
Because the towers
just say
is
the
not
towers,
reduction.
because the rest are very minor as far as what I can see from the drawings. That's my resolution anyway. I'm not gonna put a percentage on it.
Okay.
I'll support it. Get it
And it's
on the
supported by Mr. Edmonds. The roll call, Ms. Sarnicki, please.
Mr. Hudson?
No.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Is that yes? Mr. Tagle?
No.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Motion fails. Does anybody want to propose a revised resolution?
Before we do that,
Yes.
can we ask Mr. Hudson, what would satisfy you?
Postponing.
That's the
I want
only
to leave it
thing.
open. I don't want to be limited to these items.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Edmonds, would
This
you
is
like
why it's
to,
important to be at a planning commission meeting.
would you like to read a resolution? The
No.
Revised resolution, Mr. Edmonds? To postpone?
No. I'll let somebody else.
So we had how many, we had 2 no votes?
Chris?
So you've explained your no vote, Mr. Taylor. Could you clarify your no vote?
I think I've already stated that I don't think that a planning commission should sit here and dictate, number one, that it's a blue masonry glazed brick, and I want to see what the difference is going to be. Now, the petitioner says he's not going to change his rendering. Well, let him come back, and he can try that again. But, you know, again, I'm kind of agreeing with Mr. Hudson. We have a job to do here, we have an ordinance to abide by, and I don't know that we should twist ourselves all around because of a timing issue. If there was a timing issue, why is the burden on us to get somebody out of a scheduling problem? So the reasons I've stated no was more of the appearance of the building. I mean, quite honestly, if the ordinance says an accent, and I'm sure both you and Ben have sat and talked with this petitioner, and they come in with 40% EFS, I think they maybe were rolling the dice a little bit. So shame on them.
So that's helpful. So both of your reasonings for voting no was helpful. So one of the reasons we try to have a detailed resolution that was forwarded this evening is to provide direction to the applicant. I believe the applicant standing here, and he can speak to it, but I believe the direction that's been provided through the report and through the dialogue is fairly clear. So if you wanted to proceed with a resolution that was not as detailed, I think I see Mr. Butler taking copious notes there. I believe the direction's been pretty clear. So if you wanted to move forward with a resolution that perhaps wasn't as detailed, I think that would be appropriate. What are your thoughts on that, Ms. Dufresne?
I'm fine with it.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
You don't have to
Without
specifically
the
list every
details.
item.
Right.
I think you're paying attention to the comments.
But can we vote?
Leave the 6 items as is, but with nothing additional.
I think what I heard the two no's
Just a
say is
simple-
leave it more open-minded, and you could say something like address the comments in the report and identified in discussion with planning commission.
I want to make it simpler, just vote to postpone. Come back. They're not limited, we're not limited to our questions. We think we've got to focus. Who knows what's going to turn up at the next meeting?
Okay. Who wants
Do you
to?
want to, okay, I'll
address
go.
The resolution to postpone.
Sure. Ms. Sarnecki, you'll have to correct if I say, that the preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Home 2 Suites be postponed, and that the applicant come back with revised, with a response and a revised site plan based on comments received this evening as well as in the planning consultant's report.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krupa, second by Mr. Edmonds. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Krupa?
Yes?
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item is postponed.
Thank you. Thank you for the discussion.
Next item on the agenda, item number 9, preliminary site plan review, file number FE-JPLN 2018-0009, proposed GFA Square Lake condominiums north of Square Lake, east of Livernois, section 3, currently zone M and neighborhood node Q district. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you, and good evening again to the Planning Commission. I have a very brief presentation to highlight the application in front of us. Again, I'll be relying heavily on graphics in the PowerPoint because this is another rather complex review. The proposal in front of us is regards to a site that is on the corner of, not the corner, but in proximity to the corner of Livernois and Square Lake. It's an approximate 1.1 acre site highlighted in red. Currently, the site is vacant, however, it is encumbered with some tree canopy. The site is located behind the John's Market on Square Lake. You can see it with my red pointer, as well as a vacant parking lot that is associated with John's Market as well. We do know that the site is accessed via a 30-foot wide stem that comes off of Square Lake. The site in question is zone neighborhood node. It has single family to the north and to the east, and commercial to the south and to the west. The application in front of us is for a 14-unit townhouse project. The 14 units are distributed in building clusters of 3 on the back side of the site and 4 on the front end of the site. You will note there is pedestrian access with connection with the sidewalk internal of the site, and the applicant is proposing 14 guest parking spaces distributed around the site. Again, this is the point of access, it's 30-foot wide access off of Square Lake. The application the height proposed is 3 stories, approximately 39 feet in height. We do note the application complies with all the required bulk requirements, including setback, open space, lot coverage, etc. All the parking will be provided within 2-car garages within each unit for a total of 28 spaces within garages, as well as those 14 guest parking spaces that I noted before. In our review, we have highlighted really 4 issues for discussion. This includes the drive access, tree mitigation, buffering, and building materials / lighting. In regards to the access, again, I noted this is a 30-foot wide access off of Square Lake. The applicant, as presented, has proposed a 20-foot wide drive with a 4-foot sidewalk.
24.
Sorry?
Did you say 24?
24-foot wide, there's a foot curb, there's a foot here for a curb and a foot here for a curb that makes up that total of 30 feet, but the actual drive itself is 24 feet with a 4-foot sidewalk. This was a solution that we had discussed with the applicant and had worked out to provide a pedestrian connection from the site to Square Lake. In the review by the engineering department, they have requested that that actually be widened to 28 feet. The drive itself be widened to 28 feet with a foot curb on either side. That would thus obviously eliminate the sidewalk that goes along the stem. In discussions with the applicant, he has noted that he has tried to acquire portion of this lot, has tried to work with the applicant to obtain an easement to actually put the sidewalk in this location. However, he has been unsuccessful. So if this moves forward with a 28-foot drive, there will be no direct sidewalk access to this site until such time as this site develops adjacent to it. The applicant has identified 22 woodland trees on site. The applicant, as part of the development, proposes to remove all 22 woodland trees. The graphic on the right indicates those red dots indicate those areas of the 22 woodland trees. In totality, it's 208 trees that are being removed that qualify for protection. That requires 104 inches of replacement. The applicant thus is required to replace 41 trees of replacement. Part and parcel to the tree mitigation is the issue of buffering. The applicant notes that just due to the size of the lot, they do not have enough room to put in both the tree mitigation and the required landscape buffering along the northern property line. When two adjacent land uses are what we deem is not necessarily incompatible, but are different, there's single family to the north, multifamily to the south, they require a landscape buffering of 10 feet in width with required plantings. The applicant is seeking relief from that requirement to not have the required buffering, but instead put up a 6-foot tall vinyl fence. In the area where they would normally put the landscape buffering, that is where they're putting their tree mitigation. So they are providing the tree mitigation on site, but it's in lieu of providing the standard landscape buffering. Instead, they're asking relief to put in a fence. In addition, the applicant is proposing a 6-foot tall vinyl fence along this property line, supplemented with the required landscaping of these trees. So they are meeting the screening requirement for this section of the development. The applicant has submitted elevations. Again, these are 38-foot, 39-foot tall elevations. We do note that we find it to be a rather handsome building. However, materials were not indicated, so we don't know exactly what the materials are being proposed as part of the development. In addition, we do note that this does back up to or is adjacent to single-family properties. So we are asking that the lighting fixtures actually be shown on the elevations as well as be submitted for review to ensure that they do meet the dark sky requirements and are fully shielded to not impact adjacent properties. So overall, we do find the proposed use to be appropriate for the site. However, due to those outstanding items noted in our report, we are recommending postponement to address those issues as well as any issues that come up with the Planning Commission discussion tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions from the Planning Commissioners for Mr. Carlisle?
I have one, if I may. Is there any requirement concerning the materials used for fencing? I'm thinking white vinyl is going to just look awful, but you heard the word vinyl and it got me thinking, are there other materials that could be used?
I don't believe there's a material requirement other than the fact you can't use barbed wire.
Or electric.
The ordinance doesn't dictate materials. It doesn't say you need a stockade fence versus a wrought iron fence. However, he is asking relief from this to do a fence in general, so that could be a point of discussion as what materials actually used for that fence.
Mr. Tagle.
Could explain the reason for the 4-foot increase to the access drive from a 24 to a 28-foot drive?
In engineering's review, they find that the 14 units would dictate enough traffic that the 28-foot drive width would be required because that's the engineering standard for a drive width access.
But on the project we just saw, that has how many units in the hotel?
170 units.
And they have a 24-foot drive aisle to connect them to Big Beaver. So that's okay there, but it's not okay for the 28 units here, or the 14 units here. I find that there's a little bit of miscommunication here.
So we had that discussion. We are willing to go back to the engineering department and discuss this further. I can just tell you in their review to us, they are dictating 28 feet. However, we can go back and discuss this with the engineering department.
Well, I don't know if you discussed it in the context of what we just talked about in the previous application.
They reviewed those sites.
Well, I know, but sometimes the left hand and the right hand. I think the sidewalk is hugely important. I think it's important because not only the party store is there, but just on the west side of Livernois, there's a whole little strip center. There's got a restaurant in there, dry cleaners in there. I mean, there's all kinds of things that, you know, people might like to go and participate in. And I get it. There's I don't know if that's 50 or 60 foot of gravel that's not developed where that parking lot is, but beyond that, there is sidewalk all the way to Livernois and beyond.
And the solution that we came up with was the 4-foot sidewalk. And in further review by engineering, they dictated 28 feet. We will go back to them and discuss this further. The applicant, we spoke with the applicant. He is here to address this. He's willing to do whatever Planning Commission and the city dictates. I mean, if he wants a 28-foot drive, he will put that in. If Planning Commission and the city come up with a 24 or the 4-foot sidewalk, he's willing to do that as well. This is not the issue that he has any concern doing it either way.
Okay.
So to piggyback on the issue of the sidewalk, I mean, with that sidewalk coming out beyond the right-of-way line, there is no sidewalk there currently.
It's a sidewalk to nowhere.
Sidewalk to nowhere.
So gravel lot.
So we're not, it would really just serve the purpose of bringing those residents to the right-of-way line, to a gravel area that they would have to traverse to get probably a few hundred feet to the west to the closest.
There's a sidewalk, I don't know exactly how far over, over here on Square Lake. There's a sidewalk that in front of John's. So they would have to traverse this couple hundred feet to get to this sidewalk, which I assume people are doing now, as is.
Right.
And then get to the corner to cross the street. So this would provide a direct sidewalk in. Furthermore, when and if this site redevelops, we'd obviously put the sidewalk connection, so it would be put in at a future date.
The sidewalk starts
Excuse me,
7
excuse
houses
me.
down.
Hold on a second. You'll get a chance to speak a little bit later. We're just having a conversation here.
I will tell you, I've been in front of a number of planning commissions, and whether there's a sidewalk to nowhere or not isn't really a point of discussion. Because what they say is, you're developing, you put the sidewalk in. When developer B comes along, he puts, and eventually, you have a continuous sidewalk. So just because there's not one there today, I don't think should influence the decision of whether or not we feel it's a good design to have a sidewalk getting from the back to the right of way.
So I guess another question here, another topic for conversation is that sidewalk would end up being really substandard because 4 feet is not really the minimum requirement of city sidewalks, right?
Typically, a sidewalk is typically 5 feet in width. If it's adjacent to a drive, there's also a 2-foot fall length, at a minimum of a 2-foot fall area. So in essence, it would be ideally, this area from the edge of the curb to the edge of this sidewalk would be ideally 7 feet wide. We are stuck. Mr. Abedian bought a parcel that only has a 30-foot wide stem. Within 30 feet, you can only do a limited amount. So there at no point will there be the requirement or what the desired 7 foot of width there for that sidewalk area. We felt that 4 feet with a backup curb to 24 feet drive aisle was an appropriate solution based on what we have in front of us. Again, further review by engineering wants to 28 feet, and that's something we'll go back and discuss with them if the Planning Commission wants us to.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle at this point? I think this whole drive aisle issue, we're looking at a situation where, you know, are we okay with a 24-foot access point, which is very standard, and providing that pedestrian access? or should we eliminate that completely and require the 28, excuse me, require the 28-foot access, which is being requested by the engineering department? I think that's for a continued discussion here. Any other thoughts, any other questions, Mr. Brent?
Regarding the transition between this neighborhood node and the resident to the north, the other two properties that are adjacent to that one single lot look like they're very tight to that property line. I'm talking property addressed as 6050 and 6054. Could you go over what is the requirements for that transition between the two, this berm, and are these other two meeting that requirement?
I'm sorry, are you, Mr. Craig, are you talking to the
Yeah,
west?
to the west, yes, that building there, are they, do they, what if, you know, they look awful tight to that property.
There's no landscape buffering requirement from multifamily to commercial, so they're only required to put a landscape buffering along this property line because it's adjacent to single family, and along this property line because it's single family.
Right.
They're not required to put a landscape buffering on any of this section of.
But the property to the west, what were they required as far as the buffering?
So I can speak to that. So that,
What is that property?
this property here,
Oh, yeah, right.
this is office.
Office?
Office, and there's a, yes.
Okay.
There's a pharmacist in here. So this property was developed literally decades ago. And at the time, there was a requirement in the zoning ordinance that when there's a rezoning next to I'll use the word incompatible again, but you got office next to single-family residential, there was actually a requirement for that boundary line to be demarcated with a fence or a wall. It was called a zoning wall, but it could be a fence. And so at the time that this was developed, this was the standard, and that met the standard. Now in 2011, when we did a comprehensive rewrite of the zoning ordinance, we, as a planning commission, determined that a fence or a wall wasn't always the most appropriate treatment. So what we came up with was coming up with landscape buffer requirements, like in this situation here. And if there were reasons that the applicant could not or did not want to have a landscape buffer treatment, the planning commission had the authority to approve a different treatment, like a fence or a wall or a combination of fence, wall, landscaping, whatever, such as proposed. The determination of whether it's appropriate is made by the planning commission. So it wasn't prescriptive it's not prescriptive like it was in the past where you had to have a wall or a fence. It's not like that anymore.
Okay, so we can have a 10-foot buffer of landscape or a wall?
The planning commission could approve an alternate to the buffer requirement.
So, just to clarify, along these two property lines, the applicant is required to do one of two options. First is it's called a narrow evergreen, one on every 3 foot on center. That's the applicant's chosen here. The second option is to do what we call a large evergreen, and that's one on every 10 feet in center. If those are required by ordinance. Under certain circumstances, if there's not enough area or there's other circumstances the planning commission considers, the planning commission can waive that requirement to actually put in landscaping and instead allow them to do a fence or a wall. In this case, he's seeking the ability to put a fence and wall, a fence on these locations, this location because of the drive, and this location because they don't have enough area to put in both the tree mitigation requirements as well as the physical landscape buffering.
So you don't have 10 feet of buffer?
They do not have 10 feet of buffer here because these trees are what's required for mitigation. So in essence, these trees are intended to count for both mitigation and landscape buffering. We don't require that. So instead, the applicant is proposing to put a wall up.
Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
Yeah. Clear as mud.
Mr. Tagle.
The pink colored trees on the south side at the south property line, are those required?
Those, I do not believe those are required trees by the ordinance.
So when the applicant says they don't have enough room to do the mitigation and the buffering with trees, I guess I'm not sure if I agree with him. That whole southern side is available for mitigation, is that correct?
The applicant can put mitigation trees anywhere on site, they can fit them, yes.
Right. Okay, so I guess I'm not quite on the understanding why he feels that everything has to go along the north property line and thus saying he doesn't have enough space.
The applicant's here, the
we'll
applicant
talk.
address that, yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle before we, the applicant? If not, I see the applicant is here. Mike is yours.
Thank you. Name is Gary Abathera, a longtime Troy resident, builder developer in the city. I'll try to keep this as short as I can so that it won't as long as the last meeting does. But I can answer those 4 issues that we have on here. First one being drive access. I originally came up with a 28-foot driveway. Planning department thought 24 and 4 would be much better. I agreed. We have a sidewalk right now that does go to nowhere, but you're exactly right. It will connect to sidewalks in the future, and I'm a proponent of that. But engineering says we want a 28-foot, and I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place because one says 28, one says 24. I don't know who has the authority. You know, the planning commission can say we want 24. Does engineering trump planning commission? Does planning commission trump engineering? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that one, and nobody can answer that one for me.
Don't ask me that.
So I handle that one. Tree mitigation, we are removing the trees. The trees on the site, even though they are landmark trees, they are either 4 feet, 5 feet lower than existing grade, or they're not landmark.
Woodland.
Woodland trees, I'm sorry, woodland trees. It is, they're either 4 or 5 feet lower than existing grade, there's a lot of contours in there, or they're growing at a 30-degree angle. They're going this way, that way. They're not big, beautiful white oak trees or something like that. So we are mitigating the trees per your ordinance and putting them in there. To answer your question of why I'm not putting more to the south, because in 10 years, trees grow tremendously huge, tremendously big. They're going to cover up everything we have, sidewalks, people walking. I can move some of the trees from the back to the front, not an issue, but they're always going to get trimmed way back, and they're going to not be as attractive to make the building look as attractive as it is right now. By putting the pines in the back, it's doing double duty. It is a buffer to the people to the north, but it doesn't count towards tree mitigation. So I could put arborvitaes there, 3 feet wide, and then put the pines, but in 10 years, the pines are going to grow right through the arborvitaes and take care of that. If I put a wall up there, it doesn't matter if I put a vinyl fence, a concrete wall, whatever, just a wall that will divide the properties much better than the arborvitaes that the pines are going to grow through and over in 10 to 15 years. The building materials, I did bring building materials with me. I did not know at the time of application I need to bring them in, but I brought samples of my brick, my shingles, my stone, the elevation. I don't know if you've seen it. I do have my son with me. He can show them around here. Show what the front elevation looks like. You walk it around. I didn't think I needed to bring a brick sample, but we do have those here that he'll pass around and show everybody what we have. I think we're building a very, very attractive building. Lots of stone, lots of brick, and I think it'll be a plus to that area right there is what we're building. As far as lighting, there'll be a porch light on each one, but I will have whatever has to be done to make sure that they're dim and they don't affect any of the neighbors' properties. With that, I can answer any questions that you guys have for me.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Tagle. Mr. Edmonds. Mr. Edmonds.
It's another difficult property that you brought before us.
They're all difficult.
Yes, they are now. I am really, really disappointed, and I know you can do better than Jerry because you're a quality builder, but I'm disappointed that you can't save even one woodland tree in this entire property. That's a high bar for me to get over. That's my main objection. I don't have a problem with the vinyl fence. I think there are other fences that not a big fan of the wood stockade fence. I think they eventually decay and rot, but I think I would prefer that you consider, since these are neighboring residents on both sides, that you go to an 8-foot fence, no matter what you build the fence out of. Because these houses are much taller than neighboring residents. If I were a resident, I would really be concerned about that. That's it.
Mr. Tagle?
The materials, you've shown us the front elevation of these buildings, and I've looked in the packet and looked at the rear elevation and the side elevation, and it seems like the designers stopped at the front elevation. I would like to see more of that on the other sides. This is not a building that's backing up to something that nobody's going to see it. And I mean, quite honestly, I mean, I see no articulation on the back like I see on the front. I don't see any reason why there couldn't be some level, you know, again, you want the front to stand out as the front, but don't ignore the back and the sides. So I am really not supportive of what I'm seeing as far as a complete building design, envelope design on these buildings. As far as lighting, is the only lighting that's going to be on these buildings porch lighting?
Porch lighting on the front and garage lighting on the back for the garages.
And then where will the lighting on the garage, for the garages be?
On either side of the garage door.
Okay. Nothing up high?
Nothing up high.
Did you show, I don't remember, did they show actually parking lot lighting or walkway lighting?
There's no indication of actual site lighting.
Okay.
And it's not showing lighting of the actual parking lot itself, parking area.
When you consider that, I would consider very carefully the height of these lights. This is going to be a very walkable, a very, you know, a residential feel. It's not like you want a 25-foot pole like you see in the middle of a parking lot at a Costco, if you know what I mean. So that would be something that I would be looking for as far as the sensitivity and how you light the walkways, the sidewalks, and the drive aisles.
Well, the lights will all have photosynthesis lights on them, so as you walk by, they turn on.
I'm not talking so much about how they're operating, whether it's a photocell or whatever it is. I'm talking about the height of them.
Okay.
Because it really, there's been a lot of studies done that we are extremely overlit in this country. And there's been also studies done that more light doesn't necessarily mean greater safety. But all I'm saying to you is that I think the scale of this development and the fact that you have some pedestrian walkable areas, the lighting should enhance that and not detract from that. And the last comment, if I may, I'm still not sure if I'm with you on the landscaping. I am totally opposed to a white vinyl fence. And I think another look at the mitigation and where those trees could be placed, because I see a lot of space, a lot of green area that I think could start to pick up mitigation trees and still use the landscape buffering on your north and east perimeter. I'm not sure what the solution is on the drive as you move south, because I'm still opposed to a white vinyl fence, but we're running out of real estate, basically.
Correct.
So
I have no issue of moving trees and adding some more trees to the front. I mean, I've tried with putting less trees in the front to block it, but if the commission wants to see more trees there, I'm fine with it. You know, they will grow, they'll be bigger, but we can do that.
how tall are these buildings?
39 feet in height.
I can't believe in our lifetime these trees will outgrow that building.
Okay. But we don't plant trees for us, we plant them for the next generation.
I understand that.
So, I mean, that's the way trees are. They're not for us, it's for the next generation.
But you can plant trees that limit the growth or limit the height.
Okay.
I mean, they're not limitless. I mean, the different species, you know, you can say this tree will become 20 feet high or 15 feet at its maturity.
Yes.
And you're certainly aware that You can buy evergreens that are, that only grow tall. There's all kinds of varieties, the arrowhead, and things like that. So they're not gonna go over a wall or anything like that. They're still gonna provide the privacy.
Yeah, Mr. Quinn.
Yeah, I just wanted to get your idea. I don't quite understand where the fence on the, would be facing the neighbors to the east. Does that fence line go right to the end of the driveway apron and all the way north?
Absolutely. It goes right from the right-of-way line all the way to, along the road to where it starts to curve.
So is that required to do that? Because, in a normal home with a driveway, you don't have a blocking of the property between
It's not a driveway though, it's actually an access road, so.
Regardless, you still wouldn't have that next to a neighbor. I'm just saying, if you look at all the neighbors.
Because it's two different land uses, a single family adjacent to,
Okay.
and it's a drive, we do require a buffer there. There is a buffer.
All right. Hearing that, what on the north side, the buffer, what is that going to look like as far as materials, the fence itself and the plantings?
I was planning on what is in your pamphlet is probably a beige vinyl fence, 6 foot tall. I mean, unless Mr. Edmonds wants an 8 foot tall, but from the project you won't see it because the evergreens are going to cover the fence up.
But the neighbor will.
The neighbor will see a 8 foot vinyl fence for, I think it's 114 feet. But right now, I mean, he's heavily densed back there.
Oh, I know
Yeah.
what it, yeah,
Okay.
I understand that part. I'm just trying to make that fence visually disappear as much as possible. I'm wondering maybe a darker color.
We can
vinyl
go with
than
darker
beige.
color.
It's just so that it becomes more woody
Yes.
looking.
Charcoal.
Now, we can make a dark color fence coming all the way out to the right of way. I don't know if you have the option of saying we don't need a fence there. I don't
I guess
know.
we can't. I can't. As much as I would like to not see it go all the way out, I guess we have to. It's part of the ordinance.
Is that your call? You can't,
I don't think we can.
because we're going against the engineering in 24 and 28. I didn't know we could do a fence too.
We're just trying to investigate that more, Gary.
Okay.
So vinyl fence on the east side of that approach there, the access point, that will be right up to that back of curb, correctly?
It'll be right up to the back of curb.
Right up. You don't even have an inch to spare because you have the curb, then you have if you go with the 24 or 24, and then curb, and then 4 foot, so from the actual vehicles driving in, they're 3 to 4 feet away from that fence.
Correct.
So from a maintenance perspective, you can't even install any kind of bollards or anything to protect that fence. So there is a chance that somebody could run into that fence.
Correct.
And piggybacking on your point right there, that there's not even a flare at the end. Is there?
I'm sorry?
Is there a flare?
So that's up to the right-of-way line.
This is the right-of-way line, so the fence would end at the right-of-way line. And
Oh, okay.
this would be clearance for in and out visual.
Access, yeah, visual access turning, yeah.
Yep.
Now, I don't even know, I'm on the Building Code Board of Appeals, and we deal with fences all the time. And we always make from the right-of-way line back 25 feet, or 20 feet, or 15. So when the sidewalk goes in, if somebody's walking down the sidewalk, and there's a 6-foot-high fence, they take one step, boom, there's a car there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if I need to go to my own board to get a variance for it, but it should be stepped back 25 feet for a line of sight for the sidewalk that will go in someday.
Right.
You might get support for a variance in this case.
You bring up a really good point, because if that fence comes up right to the right-of-way line, right now, we don't have a sidewalk there, but once that's completed,
Correct.
a pedestrian, they're walking slower. If you get a biker going through there and you get a vehicle coming out there, the visibility is obstructed.
Disaster.
And that's a recipe for disaster. So setting it back 25 feet, maybe even, that might be better than nothing, better than bringing it to the right-of-way line.
But I don't, maybe we can ask the attorney if you guys can recommend that, or if it has to go to the Building Code Board of Appeals.
We were just talking about that.
We're just talking about the uniqueness of the situation.
Yeah. I don't think we have an answer right now.
Okay.
The gist of it is there's there is a screening requirement between multifamily and single family. The screening requirement is for a landscape buffer. There's not room for a landscape buffer. The Planning Commission has the authority to approve something in lieu of the buffer. The fence was shown. What if the Planning Commission thinks that the fence isn't appropriate and the appropriate screening is nothing? That's what we're talking about. Again, very unique situation, because nothing is not a buffer.
Well, I understand.
A curb this high is not a buffer.
I understand.
So we're wrestling with that right now.
Yeah, and I hope you wrestle in the way that we can pull that fence back north, because, you know, I think appearance-wise, safety-wise, for a lot of reasons, it's silly to bring it out to the property line.
So just, I don't know if it was clear in the report. So this situation with this 30-foot access drive was created decades ago, and I believe the city engineering department, or at least the right-of-way department at the time, was involved in creating this situation. I believe, designed this split like this. So this isn't a problem that Mr. Abthera created. It's a problem that he inherited and we have to deal with.
This would not be approved today.
Right.
I understand.
So it's a very unique situation. So we just don't have an answer right now.
All
The
right.
Planning Commission has the authority to waive that buffering requirement.
Is the nearest residence there right where it's pictured?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the nearest house. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Jessica, you had a question?
Yeah, could they get a variance to,
Well, that's what we're trying to wrap our hands around. If I guess if the fence is required, then yes, they could seek a variance. We're trying to wrap our heads around whether it's even required, based on
We're trying to wrap
Planning
that-
Commission's ability to.
We're trying to wrap around, does the Planning Commission have the authority
Yeah.
to waive that requirement, or would it require a variance from the zoning board of appeals?
But the ordinance still requires some sort of buffer.
Correct.
So,
So, I don't know if we can answer that right now.
I mean, I guess just for the sake of discussion, some of the critical points that were brought up was especially safety. Safety was the one that is paramount here. And if we're talking about a fence that comes up to the right-of-way line and it impacts the safety of the residents or just the neighbors walking or biking up and down that sidewalk, then I think that should be a priority. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Okay, no.
To address Mr. Edmonds have you seen the site and seen the woodland trees? They're not beautiful trees. And I mean, I always want to save a tree when I can, but this
Out of
site.
28 trees, I could find one that should be safe.
Okay, but this site, I mean, we're looking at the picture, it looks like it's 5 acres. That's 1.1 acres, and it has a tremendous amount of concrete because the fire department gets involved of what they have to turn their big trucks around. So anything that I had to move, I had to make room and move buildings and move things to allow for a fire truck to be able not to pull in, but to back up. Well, they don't back up, they don't have reverse, so they have to pull in and try to make a circle somehow.
Make a good point.
So, you know, if I could eliminate those, I would, but I am replacing the trees as your ordinance states, and I think I'm going to put in a stronger, healthier tree that will grow into a better location than what's there.
Okay, thank you. So this is not a public hearing, but I see that there are a number of residents that probably came for this item on the agenda, so you will be given an opportunity to speak. Please limit your comments to just 3 minutes. We will not be answering any questions. If you just want to address your concerns and anything related to this, you may. Please sign up. On the sign-in sheet there, state your name and your relationship to this project where you are. So if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to speak, now is your chance.
I'm already signed up, so I don't have to sign.
Yeah, please speak into the mic and to the microphone.
My name is David Cole. I live at 211 Ottawa. And I didn't really come here to have too many comments on this, but, you know, there's a cluster development that is being considered out on Ottawa, which most of these people here are probably here today because of that issue. And the only issue I see with this development is an issue that is out on Ottawa, and you have one point of entry and exit into this facility. And the big issue that came up in the meeting, as you may recall, 3 weeks ago, was getting fire trucks in and out up there. Now, I heard a fella say something about, well, they can go in there and they can back up. I drive a 36-foot RV. Backing up is not an easy issue. And I'm not too worried about the fire truck, but I am worried about school buses. The school bus, I assume, is going to go up there to pick up students. I don't think they're going to pick them up on Square Lake, although they could.
Not true. Sorry. They will have to walk down to Square Lake.
Well, then, if they're going to walk down to Square Lake, then you better get the issue solved on 24 feet and sidewalk, because otherwise you're going to have kids trudging through snow, no sidewalk, okay? So if you say that's going to happen, that's fine, although I'm not allowed to ask questions, so you shouldn't have been able to. But that's an issue that he may be right, but if he's not right, and you're going to be backing up a 30, I don't know what house size the school bus is, but I know what size my RV is, and it's about the same thing. They don't back up easy. And unfortunately, on Ottawa, it was a long, long time ago, but we did have a child run over by a school bus, okay, and killed. So that's my concern, getting in and out of there with something other than an automobile, okay?
Thank you. Anybody else wishes to speak?
I'm Marsha Bossberger. I would say my position for this is my kids ride their bikes. I try to run. And the connection of the sidewalks for the last 40 years, if we're just going to wait until they eventually connect, and eventually connect, and eventually connect, there's 7 houses down of no sidewalks, all the way down to John's Market's gravel. So there's a permanent bike trail through everyone's front yards that lives along that way. So to me, to make this a neighborhood node, a walking community, I see no interaction with this. It's kind of like buried in behind everything. There's no community. You can't even put like you're gonna walk in circles in your own, apartment complex, I guess. But that's my concern, is that I've always had an issue that Smith Middle School is across the street. And now with the 43 other townhomes and the increased traffic over by Pepe's, I quit letting my kids ride their bikes to school because we almost all, 3 of us got taken out by someone turning left. So that is a big concern, and I know Karen has the same concerns, because her kids do have to wait on Square Lake to catch the bus.
With no sidewalk.
With no sidewalk. So, and so you say there's 12 kids. So 12 kids, let's say 12 kids live in that complex. They're all going to go down that sidewalk and wait at the end of the street in a single file line on a 4-foot wide. No, they're going to clump together. They're going to be pushing each other. You know, somebody could get hurt. So whether or not you make like a bus stop with a bench, make it cute. I mean, there's something to give the area. Kids are not going to stay on a 4-foot sidewalk. So that is my.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi. I'll sign in after. My name's Rosemarie Thomas. I live at 335 Ottawa. And I just think we're all here tonight because we're concerned with this developer. We obviously came to the meeting a few weeks ago with the proposed development at 400 Ottawa. So we're just trying to keep tabs on what this developer's doing. We're concerned about what's happening in Troy with the development of these little clusters of woodlands and natural area that's getting diminished in our city. So we're here, we're all concerned citizens. We want to make sure that everything's being followed the way it should be followed and things are being built the way they should be built, and that the Planning Commission is aware that there are citizens that live here in the community that are concerned, and we just want to keep tabs on everything, and that's why we're here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then we'll bring it back to the table. Any other comments, questions, or to the resolution? Ms. Cooper?
Resolution to postpone?
Yes.
Do you want to read it?
Sure. That preliminary site plan approval pursuant, or should I start from the top? Or can I start
You
from
can
the
start,
top?
you can resolve, that's good enough.
That resolved that the preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed GFA Square Lake condominiums located north of Square Lake and east of Livernois in Section 3, currently zoned NN, Neighborhood Node Q, District be postponed.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Cooper, second by Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Roll call, Ms. Sarnicki, please.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abiadian?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Resolution is postponed.
Could I ask what I need to bring back? I mean, I've heard different things, but the other applicant, he had all kinds of direction of what you were looking for. To me, it's just postponed.
Sure, Mr. Carlin.
That's fair.
So the issues that I wrote down of further consideration by the applicant as well as a combination of consideration by the city, this tree mitigation location, and also at that tree mitigation location, the fence material itself and the height of said fence material, said fence, access, whether it's a 28-foot or whether it's a sidewalk on the side of it with 24, whether or not the Planning Commission has the authority to waive the fence or buffer requirement along the property, or along the driveway on the eastern property line, and lastly, thank you, Mr. I'm gonna get there, guys. More articulation on the side and rear elevations to be consistent with the front elevation. And lastly, confirmation on all site lighting, including building as well as site lighting itself. Is there any issue?
Two of the things, though, that you guys are gonna, I can't do anything about, right?
We will go back and discuss internally and get back to you.
Okay. Can I be on the next agenda if I get all the stuff in by Friday of what Ben needs? Because time is of the essence, and everything you see is not a major.
We will do our best to work with you to keep you moving. And we're pretty good at doing that.
Okay.
But also, it's contingent on you and your consultants to deliver the bids.
However, engineering and you guys work it out, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your time this evening.
Item number 10 on the agenda, public comment for items on the current agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to any item? You get one more chance to on the items.
Appreciate it.
Sure. One more thing.
Go ahead, please step up to the mic.
Yeah. On your list of items, whether it's going to be 24 or 20, it's very important, because if you can't put a sidewalk there, you can't pick up kids. So that should be on your hit list, okay? That if the engineering will not allow you to put a sidewalk there, then you can't put buildings there that have kids in it that have to go to school. That's really that simple. Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Avis Landesser. I live on Ottawa. And I was very unhappy to see what happened on our street. I did want to ask a couple of questions. Have all the people in the area been notified, like we were notified, that this was going to happen in their neighborhood? That they were going to have a property behind them that was so much taller than the surrounding area? I'm saddened to see what's happening to our city in those areas. It just seems like every bit of green area that's available, somebody has to go in there and I'm not against capitalism, I really am not. But I think if they had brought to you a proposal with lower, instead of 14 units, maybe 6 or 8 units that were more income, looked like the surrounding area. Have you had any input from people, from John's there? Because he's been grandfathered there for years. I've lived in Troy since 1955, so I've seen a great change. And I've been remiss in my civic duty to find out what the heck was happening to my community. Years ago, when Mayor Huber was the driving force in Troy, I did try to keep track of what was happening in our city. But time goes on and life happens and you don't watch everything that happens. And I've been very remiss in not seeing, if I had any idea that the property, the Barnard property, would be developed the way it is today. I went to all of these sites today and it's the saddest thing to see what's happening to property. And I'm surprised that that kind of development, all of a sudden, it's there and I didn't know anything about it, and that's my fault. I don't think, I think a lot of people probably fall in the category that I fall in. I'm also seriously opposed to developing, I don't understand why development takes place before roads to those developments are, we develop property and then we bring the roads up to where we should have done before that happened. So I'm not opposed to this, to things happening. I really am not. I know things, life happens, and it's not going to be the same. Like you said, change is constant. But this kind of change in Troy saddens me. It truly does. But I want to watch what's happening, and I won't be able to do anything about it. I'm just a poor little voice in the wilderness. But I am going to watch more carefully. And I'm sorry I haven't watched up till this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you sign in, ma'am? Ma'am, did you sign in?
Yes, I did. I'm just going to say one more thing, and I think it's really, really important. We're forgetting about our senior citizens, and these houses, the 43 townhomes that were just built by Peppies, anybody with physical disabilities, bad knees, whatever, they're not going to move there, and they're not going to stay there. Those are temporary housing for temporary people. And this build is going to be temporary housing for temporary people. And I haven't seen anything being built. You can point it out to me, but nothing being built for our senior community. And what's out there are the older homes in the Sylvan Glen area and our street and Arnold's Lakes over there. Those are our other ranches. But they're not, they stay there till as long as they can, but they're not being, the houses now are more required to have wider hallways where you can stay forever. But we're not having those houses where you can stay forever anymore. These are all temporary housing, temporary people. They're not going to be there, like a lot of us have been.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 11 on the agenda, Planning Commission comments. Mr. Taylor.
Well, I appreciate the comments from the audience tonight, and I want to repeat much of the discussion we've had around this table echoes what they're saying. And until the developers realize the direction of housing and what's really going to be attractive housing in the future, we still fight the same battle.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper.
No comment.
Mr. Grant.
Well, the only thing that's glaring to me is in this
all the discussion we had today was the proverbial sidewalk to nowhere. I wonder if a citizens group or the city officials would put on the ballot what it would cost to put sidewalks on all the major mile roads, and then let people decide if they want that kind of a connection with both walking and bicycling and all those as more of a safe way to bike. Biking at 40 with traffic at 45 miles an hour is really hazardous. It might be an issue that we address citywide as opposed to little pieces of sidewalks. Just my thoughts.
Sorry, I forgot. I did want to ask, since it brought the whole green space committee, there was that Parks and Rec had a subcommittee initiative to look at the green spaces in Troy. Do you know where they are, what happened to them?
I don't, I'm not involved in that, I can find out.
Mr. Ms. Zarnicki?
None, thank you.
Mr. Edmonds?
No comment.
Mr. Green?
No, thank you.
Mr. Carlisle?
No, thank you.
Mr. Sava?
Just one thing, I had a lot of neighbors here this evening wanting to stay informed and stay involved, and I heard at least one person say that their frustration with not being able to have a voice. These meetings are open to the public. I'm glad there's some people here this evening that showed up and listened and commented. That's great. You can also follow on television. The agendas are posted online prior to every meeting, and we're always looking. We've got boards and committees that do have a voice and are important, such as the Planning Commission, such as the Zoning Board of Appeals, such as the Building Code Board of Appeals, Global Troy, etc. They're always looking for people who are interested. So I would encourage everyone here, you can fill out an application, you can go to the clerk's office next door, you can get a hard copy, fill it out and submit it. You can download it online, submit it online, email it in. Opportunities where you not only have a voice, but you can get involved, and you can also run for council. If you want to affect policy, you do it by voting and you do it by running for office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Just
Edmonds.
one other thing, Mr. Savage, did you also explain the notification? I know.
Notification in this instance is a preliminary site plan review. Notices were not mailed to abutting residences.
That's up to 300 feet.
They were not mailed to residents within 300 feet for this application.
Because it doesn't, the ordinance does not require.
That's correct.
What ordinances require? I mean, what kind of site plans require?
The
It's a rezoning.
applications that require notification are single-family cluster developments such as Ottawa, which because it's a decision by City Council, special use applications, rezonings, planned unit developments. We also, we also for applications that are site condominiums, we provide notice to abutting properties.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no comments, so we are adjourned. Thank you.